Alright, in this video we're just going to talk about using this little oxyacetylene setup. Some basic oxyacetylene cutting instructions, and then we're going to cut up a couple pieces of angle iron I got to get rid of. So in this little setup we have the oxygen bottle and the acetylene bottle, of course the associated regulators, the oxygen and acetylene lines, and the torch with the cutting tip. So just as a matter of safety, one of the things you always want to do is inspect your hoses for dry rotting or cracks, because you don't want anything leaking on you during any cutting or heating or welding operations. So you also want to make sure your fittings are tight, all your various fittings. So again, this is the cutting tip. In here I have this tip, which is for welding and brazing, and then you can actually get what's known as a rosebud tip. I don't currently have one of those. I'd like to get one because I had to use these before for, heating up big bolts that were stubborn to get them out, especially working on old vehicles or equipment. So first thing we're going to do is open our bottles. So what I like to do is open the oxygen all of the way, and then I just kind of crack open the acetylene about a quarter of a turn. Oxygen because you want a good flow of oxygen. Acetylene, if something starts flaming up on you, you got an emergency, you can cut it off kind of quick. So let's go ahead and do that. So we got oxygen pressure. I don't know if you can see this, but the nut for the acetylene is this little, almost kind of like if you had one of those little four-way, what do you call it, silcock keys. It's just a square. You could probably use a small silcock key or a drum key. This came with this little wrench. So you could use a crescent wrench, but you might end up rounding it off. So I'm just basically going to crack that little guy open. Okay, as far as pressures, as far as oxygen goes, I'm going to be running it around 38 to 40. Now I know a lot of people, if they're cutting, somewhat thick steel, they might run it up to 50, maybe even 60. But I tend to run it around 38, 40 for home use. For the acetylene, I run it around 5 or 6. You don't want to ever run this over 15. 5 or 6 is plenty enough for home cutting. As far as other safety tips, of course you're going to want to have a well ventilated area, and you're going to want to make sure you don't have anything underneath the cutting area that can get caught on fire. No flammable cans, gasoline cans, or anything you want to get ruined. And you especially don't want to have your hose underneath you. That's the last thing you want to do, is rupture your hose. Of course you're going to want to have a dark enough glass. This is my welding helmet, which is a little bit of overkill, self-darkening. I'll be using these. Let's get this thing started. So on the cutting handle itself, you have your valve for your acetylene, valve for your oxygen, and then on the cutting tip itself you have another valve just for oxygen. And there's a very particular way we control these. at least the way I was taught to. And just a disclaimer, I'm obviously not a professional. I have been doing this a long time, but I'm just skilled enough to basically do what I need to do. And I was basically taught by some old timers in the military. I was actually a diesel truck mechanic, and I worked on aircraft refueling equipment. But when I didn't have any trucks to fix and there was no detail work to do, like scrubbing the shop floors, I would go down to the body shop and learn how to cut and weld from the old timers there. So that's where I learned to cut with a plasma torch, with an oxyacetylene torch. That's when I learned to weld with a MIG welder, a TIG welder, and oxyacetylene itself, although I don't do that much. Alright, so enough yapping, let's get going. So the first thing I do is open the oxygen valve, and then I just very slightly, this isn't a very good background for you to see, so. Yeah, it's a little bit better. So we open the oxygen valve, and I'm just going to slightly crack the acetylene valve. You don't want to open it up because you don't want a large flame. Probably could have went a little bit more, but then what I try to do is get a nice flame that's somewhat clean burning. Then I open the oxygen valve right here. I don't know if you can see this, but there's a very distinct cone shape in the flame that they call the feather. You want to get that feather, and this is just what those old timers taught me, as small as possible. But you don't want it to disappear. You can't really see it with this camera and this lighting, but basically there's just a little sharp triangle of a blue flame in the middle of that. Alright, so I'm going to move some stuff here like my creeper because I don't want to set my creeper on fire. Okay, so I got my flame set to where I want. So the first thing I'm going to do is just basically start heating the area where I'm going to cut. So I'm heating the area I want to cut, going back and forth a little bit. And this is going to burn off a lot of the rust and paint or whatever debris is on there. And then once I have the area sufficiently somewhat heated, I'm going to concentrate on the area I'm going to start cutting. And as soon as you see that like really hot molten layer, you're going to want to apply your oxygen lever here. So like welding, it's a function of speed, so you want to go quick enough where you get a nice cut, but you don't want to go so slow. That wasn't very pretty. My whole purpose here is just to get these cut so I can get them down to the junkyard. If I was trying to make a really straight cut, I would have put a lot more attention to detail into that. But again, it's all about your speed. So let's get this other one here cut. Let's get the other one up here. Let's get this a little bit closer this time. Okay. Oops. Getting a nice flame going. Turning on the oxygen valve. Getting that feather down to be as minimal as possible. I'm going to heat the area where I'm going to cut. This type of stuff always goes much less smoother when you're doing it on camera. Okay, as soon as we get cherry red, we're going to apply the oxygen. If you want, you can grab it. There, that went a lot smoother. Alright, to turn it off, I'm going to turn off the oxygen, turn off the acetylene. And that's pretty much it. So again, I'm going down to get this stuff weighed in to get money for the steel. So the purpose of me cutting it is just basically to get it where it'll sit on the weight scale down there. So I could probably cut the stuff up a little bit more, but I'm going to be saving my gas. One of the things I failed to mention when I talked about using 38 to 40 psi of oxygen, this is a function of how thick the metal is that you're going to be cutting. This is a 1/4 inch angle iron, so I didn't need a lot of pressure there. But if it was, 3 or 4 inches thick, I'd probably be bumping this up to like 60. So I think that's pretty much it. I just want to do a quick little, I wouldn't say tutorial because I'm not really the greatest at this, but it works for me. When you're all done, I just close up my valves. And then what I like to do is let all of the gas out of the line. All right, that's it. Later.